Hello, you're watching BookTube with Simon and Amy. I hope you're doing really well. This is your 48-hour warning. Please, if you have not yet done so and would like to, post your comments or your response video to Hamlet versus Macbeth by close of business on Tuesday UK time. That is 2 days from today, to give our independent adjudicator time to count and verify the votes in this battle of the tragic titans. We will bring you the result of this particular battle on a very special Summer Spectacular episode that is coming to you live at 5 on Thursday the 15th of July. It also features the final instalment of 000 in COVID Royale. Will Agent 000 discover who is behind the dastardly plot and defeat them? It also includes a very special and very important channel announcement and some pretty cool surprises you're not going to want to miss. So please make sure you are available to watch us on the 15th of July. But for today, I don't know if you're aware of this, but apparently there's some sort of sporting event happening at the minute that our friends south of the border seem quite excited about. And we are very happy for them. So I thought we should have a bit of a tournament as well, but I have all of the football skills of a dead parrot, so instead I thought I would talk about what I know best. Terrible, awful books. I should know, I've written some. So today we are going to have the battle of the worst book ever. Yes, I'm doing some social good because I have read some appalling books in my life, and if I can save you from the tragedy of having to endure them, then I shall. So if any of these are on your TBR, take them off. They are not worth it. Shuggy Bane is not on this list because my bodyguards are on furlough and because I quite enjoyed it. So instead, here are 20 books that I absolutely detested, and we're going to find out which of the 20 is the absolute definite 100% worst book that should definitely be pulped and fed to the author in a paste mixed with cement so it solidifies inside them and they die. That's what the plan is for today. This is Euro 20's Plenty. This is how it's going to work. Cue amazing graphic. So we're going to have 20 books and they are going to be split into pairs. This is the group stages. It's going to be a knockout. Each pair are going to go head to head. The worst of the pair will go forward and the other one will be knocked out of the competition. The 10 books that go forward will then also go head to head, and so on until we finally declare ourselves the champion, the winner of worst book ever. Let's start with the first group. So round one, to bed you in and give you a little bit of familiarity, we're going to start with two books that we've talked about before on this channel, and both of them are courtesy of that absolute pain in the tonsils Kieran at KD Books, who's very funny and you should subscribe, but do not read any book that he recommends for the love of Pete. It is Les Mis versus the Infernal Desire Dream Machine Thingamajigs of Dr. Hoffman What's-His-Face by Alice Carter. So both of these we've discussed before. I'm therefore not going to go into huge amounts of detail again about how much I hate them. Watch the videos if you haven't. That's why I post them. Les Mis probably does have a relatively good story, to be fair, and you've got this sort of uprising going on, and it's all about the little man and, you know, all these sorts of wonderful themes. And, you know, okay, fair enough, you do end up trying to back the criminal who managed to get himself breaking the law, thrown into jail, broke the rules, extended a sentence, and somehow he's a hero. I mean, here we just call them Neds. But anyway, the problem with Les Mis is that it is far too long. This is what went down in Les Mis town. So, wrote the book, Victor Hugo, here we go, there we are, there's my manuscript. Publisher says, it's 120 pages. He says, yes, it's 120 pages. Oh, caramba, we ordered 1,200 pages per copy. What are we going to do? And Victor Hugo says, well, that's unfortunate. I know what to do. I'll just expand a couple of bits, which is why you then have the Bishop of Digny describing over multiple pages all of the different kinds of chairs he's got in the house. It's why you've got a line-by-line expenditure list of precisely what the Bishop of Digney has spent all of his money on. It is why, instead of witnessing a conversation which may inadvertently be interesting, it is instead described back to us via a letter from his sister that is completely boring. It is, in short, dreary and dull. There is no reason for it to be 1200 pages long. That is insulting to the reader. Victor Hugo is laughing at us. He is saying, you've nothing better to do with your life than read 1200 pages of my drivel. You don't have other books to read. You don't have places to be. You don't have things to do. All you're going to do is sit in the house for 18 months without seeing anybody, doing anything, going anywhere. Oh God, he's right. That is exactly what we've just done. On the other hand, Alice Hoffman's Dream Desire Machini Mimosas, that is short, and you certainly can't accuse it of nothing happening. The thing is, everything that happens is just that little bit more disturbing than whatever happened the chapter before. I mean, I really found it quite difficult to read because of the sheer amount of paedophilia and child abuse that just seemed unnecessary. The strange violence, the strange perversions, the strange raping of sleepwalking minors, everything was just quite strange. It's not the sort of thing that I would recommend to my granny. I mean, she's been dead for the best part of 40 years, so if I recommended anything to her, I'd probably get whisked off to the loony bin, to be fair. So which of these two is the worst book? Crazy plot or long dragged out plot? I have to say that I think that although they are both awful, at least Alice Carter did write a plot which is fast moving and in which things happen, albeit not quite to my taste, whereas Les Miserables is an insult that Victor Hugo seems to have gotten away with throwing at us simply because better writers than he somehow converted this tome of torturous twaddle into what is quite a good musical. So for that reason, I'm going to say that Les Mis is worse than Alice Carter. Alice Carter, you are eliminated from the tournament. You are not the worst book.
You're simply the worst than anything I've read. Your other didn't have to know. And on and on and on.
Angela Carter. I did that during the review as well. Anyway, let's move on. We're now going to put against each other 72 Virgins by the current UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, and that is going head to head against The President is Missing by Bill Clinton and James Patterson. 72 Virgins was written by Boris Johnson, I believe in the 90s, and I read it when he became Prime Minister. I was working away in Serbia at the time, and I read it on the plane. And it's basically about some jihadists attempting to bomb Parliament in order to get, of course, their 72 virgins when they reach paradise. This was another DNF for me, someone who does not often DNF, but I DNF'd it. And the reason that I DNF'd it is because I found it highly offensive. Now, admittedly, the 90s was 30 years ago, but, I mean, let's be honest, the Spice Girls single Wannabe was 25 years old this week just past, and The Office, the UK, the better edition, the UK edition of The Office was also 25 years old this week, and if that doesn't make you feel old, then you are even older than I thought. So, albeit that was a while ago, it is very homophobic and very racist. He transliterates exactly how people speak with varying accents and plays into a lot of tropes. And I'm okay with satire, and I'm okay with even doing satire of sensitive issues. I don't think there's anything fundamentally wrong about a terrorist satire. I'm not a massive fan of censorship, and so I'm not going to just trash it for that reason. But you know, when you compare it to something like Four Lions, which is a pretty good film about these terrorists, and it shows their humanity and it tries to sort of use their character a bit, 72 Virgins just seems like a very sneering, nasty book written by, you know, a very privileged white man who's now the Prime Minister of our country, and it just left a really bad taste in my mouth, and I couldn't finish it. I couldn't enjoy it because I felt it was really uncomfortable. Meanwhile, The President is Missing was written, as I say, by Bill Clinton and James Patterson about the President of the United States going missing. Again, that was one that I got to read on the plane. Now, this is what you would expect to happen. You would expect the former President of the United States to give all the presidential White House type information, and James Patterson, a very prolific thriller writer who admittedly doesn't write most of his thrillers, and together they would be a powerhouse of info and delivery. What appears to have happened is James Patterson provided the politics and Bill Clinton provided the thriller, because I was not thrilled, I was not. The book spans only a couple of days, and in those couple of days the President of the United States goes missing. He is kidnapped. This is a disaster. I think he was kidnapped. Maybe he pretended to be kidnapped, and maybe that was a spoiler. But it's okay, because you're not going to read it, because these are all terrible books. It had the tension of a boiled potato. It was so boring. The President had zero character. The urgency was not there. Nobody seemed to react. There seemed to be no particular consequence to the President going missing. Considering who the President was at the time this was published in 2019, perhaps it is because we are all hoping the President would go missing. But nevertheless, I was robbed of a decent book. The plot was just very dry, and what has really smashed my onion about this is the fact that he has brought out, would you believe it, or the two of them together have brought out, would you believe it, a sequel called The President's Daughter, which is about the President's daughter, and I presume there is some apparent thriller event happening. Now, I don't know whether this means they are just the most unlucky and careless presidential family. Maybe it is the daughter of the next president. I don't know. Not only do I not know, I have no plans to know. Further than having no plans to know, I have plans to not know. I am not reading it. I am boycotting it. I am not interested in it. We should not be rewarding one pile of garbage by saying, okay lads, give us another pile of garbage. I was drawn in by the brand power of James Patterson, which is unusual because I have read several James Pattersons and I didn't like any of them, and I gave all my James Pattersons away except Sale and the one about Tutankhamun, because that one seemed quite interesting, but I am less likely to read it now than I was before. And the former President of the United States, because the former President of the United States writing a thriller about the former President of the United States should be good, right? No, it wasn't. So, here's my ruling, purely on the basis of the fact they're bringing out a sequel and I need to nip this smack right down in the bud. That is a worse book. Bojo, you are eliminated from the contest.
You aren't the champion, my friend, 'cause I couldn't reach you to the end.
Stop your whinging, chick-lit fans. It's not all blood, guts and gore. Coming up next, we're going to pit against each other. We're going to pit the wits of Sue Townsend and The Woman Who Went to Bed for a Year against 50 Shades of Grey by E.L. James and the author of Twilight, Stephanie Meyer. So, The Woman Who Went to Bed for a Year was given to me by my friend Arlene to read, and I read the whole book and she said, what did you think? And I said, to be honest, Arlene, I didn't really like it. And she said, no, me either. Well, why the hell have you given it to me, you stupid woman? You could have told me this. Why didn't you open with this? I've read this shocking book. Not, here you go. Oh yes, I knew it would be rotten. That would be like me making some sort of feces risotto for my wife for dinner, and then when she says, oh well, it doesn't taste very nice, going, no, I know, that's because I did a jobby in the pan and served it with some rice. Thanks, Arlene. But anyway, the reason that I didn't really like The Woman Who Went to Bed for the Year, I mean, the plot needs no real introduction, does it? A woman goes to bed for a year. Is it quickly snowballs into farce, and it's really difficult to have any sort of connection to any of the characters. The woman is a selfish git. Every member of her family is just a spoiled, unlikable caricature. There's nothing hugely enjoyable about the book, and then it just sort of ends. It doesn't really resolve anything. The whole thing is just a really weird, odd experience that doesn't feel like a story in any way. Nothing develops in any significant fashion. It's not funny enough to be a comedy. It's not touching enough to be literary fiction. It's just nothing. And Angie's book Chatter recently read this book in a buddy read, and she shared some discomfort with some of the language and some of the kind of jokes that were made at the expense. I think particularly homophobia was a bit of a theme in that book, which I don't remember from reading it back then, but it's not great really to get that additional comment. So not fantastic by any manner of means. We put that up against 50 Shades of Grey, known to middle-aged women the world over for reminding them that they have more than simply a fart machine between their legs. However, it is not a good book. It is a rubbish book. It is terrible for multiple reasons. Anna Steele does not act like a normal human being. Christian Grey is not a normal human being. I read this because my friend Andrea told me that I wasn't allowed to insult it without reading it, so I read it. The only book I've ever read in a Kindle because I didn't want to be seen dead with it, and I thoroughly hated it. The writing itself, the actual writing, is abysmal. I will never forget that one of the opening lines is Anna travels at terminal velocity in an elevator. You cannot travel at terminal velocity and then continue whimpering for another 3 books, because it's not terminal then, is it, Anna? And the relationship is ridiculous. It is not a decent representation of a BDSM relationship. The fact that Christian Grey had to come from some sort of abuse to make him interested in it is quite offensive to a whole community, and honestly I just didn't see anything that was enjoyable about this book at all. It is not erotic, it is not exciting, it is just weird and kind of creepy. It is a middle-aged woman who tried to rip off the Twilight series unsuccessfully and then became an undeserving millionaire on the back of it. It does not deserve the success. It is horrific, and every bookshop you will ever see, every charity shop and second-hand bookshop is rammed full of these copies, which suggests that people do not really want to hang on to them. So I don't feel that it is fair to say to the late and usually great Sue Townsend, the creator of Adrian Mole, that she ranks below the travesty of 50 Shades of Grey. So 50 Shades of Grey is worse. Sue Townsend and The Woman Who Went to Bed for a Year are out of the tournament. You may go to bed, Sue.
You came in like a wrecking ball, my expectations masterpiece. All I wanted was a decent read, but no, you wrecked it.
Sounded a bit too much like a Rest in Peace reference, actually. I might cut that. Round 4, let's get on to some classics, and we'll start with which is Nadsit for the Clockwork Orange. It is a book that is allegedly fantastic, but I wouldn't know because I can't understand a word of it, and that goes up against Travels with My Aunt. This book was recommended to me while I was in hospital recovering from a heart attack in 2014, and the person who was in the next bed, the bed opposite, said you should really read this book. And despite the fact that Maggie Smith is on the cover and featured, I believe, in the film, I mean, I guess that's why she's on the cover, the travel just seems to be not really very exciting, is it? It falls into the category of classic in the usual way, boring, whereby if this book was written today it would not be published because it is boring and written boringly and the characters are boring and nothing happens because it's boring. I actually just wanted to have another heart attack, so I had a good excuse for not finishing it. I would rather be dead. Compare this to The Clockwork Orange, which, as I say, is written in Nadsit, which so which of those is worse? Hell, I mean, I know that The Clockwork Orange has allegedly got a very good plot, and I know it does have a movie by Stanley Kubrick, which seems to sort of try and turn into some sort of moving picture presentation. But I can't really insult anybody by saying that your book is worse than one that just looks like alphabetic spaghetti vomited on a page. So I'm afraid The Clockwork Orange is worse. Travels with My Aunt, your journey has ended on this tournament.
I want my cash back in my hand. Baby, that book was for sale.
Round 5, team, and let's get some drama. Going head to head this time, we have 7 Lies versus, I've forgotten. 7 Lies versus Secret Asset by Stella Rimington. 7 Lies by Elizabeth Kay was a book that I mentioned in my 2021 TBR as a book that I wanted TR, and it is about 2 friends. 7 lies told by one friend leads allegedly to the death of the other friend's partner, whom the lying friend has an extreme dislike to. This is the premise. If I hadn't lied, he would not be dead. And so we read this book from the first person perspective of the lying friend. I have 3 fundamental problems with this book. Problem number 1 is the overuse of parenthesis, which really started to squish my donut, truth be told. As we travel through the tedium of 7 Lies, she continues to put sentence within sentence within sentence within sentence. If a thing is worth saying, put it in a sentence in its own right as part of a normal structure. If a thing is not worth saying, do not say it. Do not bury redundant clauses 7 parenthesi deep. The second problem that I have, and trigger warning for eating disorders, is that the protagonist's sister has, well, quite clearly from what I just said, an eating disorder. I am no expert in this, and I am ready to be educated by people who are perhaps more knowledgeable on this topic than me, but my gut feeling and instinct was that throughout this book, the progress of the sister's eating disorder was described in graphic detail that I found to actually be very gratuitous and quite irresponsible. My limited understanding of presentation of eating disorders in books and media is that by describing things in that level of detail can actually be seen as glorifying it to people who are in the throes of this horrific set of circumstances. It added nothing to the plot. It was not relevant to the plot. That does not mean that it is wrong to have a supporting character with an eating disorder. I think in many cases you can do a lot of good by having a supporting character with a condition like that and raise some awareness of some of the issues and how they can be resolved. Spoiler warning, it's not resolved. It just seems to be like misery porn for the protagonist, who then has to grieve for their sister. But I found the treatment of of the whole topic very, very irresponsible, and I was deeply concerned about the way that it was portrayed, and I just don't think that that is right at all. So that is my second problem with it. Third, paradoxically, the pace is both too fast and too slow. The big climax, the most important part of the book, I suppose, comes round about the 2/3 mark, and in the final third of the book, everything just sort of slows down and all of the tension sort of disappears, and there's really nothing that's driving the story forward. We have lost all momentum and it seems really, really drawn out. But there was one last thing that had to happen, and that last thing that happened over the course of the last 2 or 3 pages, which meant that the ending was both extremely slow and incredibly rushed, very unsatisfying, and the ending was not at all pleasing. So that is not a great write-up. Pitted against that is Secret Asset by Stella Rimington. Stella Rimington is the former Director General of MI5, the British intelligence services focusing on domestic threats. She was also the first female Director General, and she elected to, in her retirement, write a spy book. Fantastic, you might say. I might have learned my lesson from Stella Rimington actually, but I didn't, based on what I then went on to experience with Bill Clinton. But Stella Rimington's spy book was not very good. It contained very little actual spying. It was about a spy who I believe was called Liz, who investigated a case which wasn't particularly complex or interesting. It didn't seem realistic. It seemed like it was written by somebody who had never been involved in spy work, probably because she wasn't allowed to use a lot of what she knew in her story. And the most frustrating thing is that, as with most female protagonists in any sort of thriller or adventure story of that nature, is that it got unnecessarily wound up and caught up in romance and female fluff that would just not happen if it was a male spy in the same way. There was far too much emotion and anguish that was just unrealistic given the threat that she was facing, and I think that Stella Rimington, especially as the first female Director General of MI5, did a disservice to female spies and to basically female professionals across the world. So neither of those are fantastic, but I do have to say that purely because of my concerns about the way that the eating disorder situation was addressed, I am going to say that is worst of the two. Stella Rimington, unfortunately, you are dismissed.
It's a final song now. You're such a letdown.
Next up, it is Girl on the Train versus The Colour of Lies. Colour of Lies I spoke about in one of my first videos on this channel. Cute. The Colour of Lies is about a babysitter who is babysitting for a family, the elder daughter of which family has gone missing. The babysitter has the ability to see puffs of smoke around everybody which reflects their emotion, including telling when they are lying by having this visual cue of coloured smoke. And so you would think that in the middle of this intriguing situation full of lies, that she might just ask some direct questions, find out who's lying, and solve the mystery. Alas, no, she did not. It was a completely wasted device. The story was rubbish. I spoke about that at length. Please go watch it. It's why I post them. Compare this with The Girl on the Train. Now, I have mentioned in passing my distaste for The Girl on the Train. Now, I look back at my Goodreads review of it and I actually gave it 4 stars. The reason that I complain so much about The Girl on the Train is because it is the first book I recall being compared with Gone Girl. Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn is possibly the best thriller I have ever read in my life, and remains so. Wow, it has actually been 8 years since I read 8 years on! Oh jeez, that's worse than the Spice Girls been 25. 8 years! Anyway, so the point I'm trying to make here is it is the first book which I recall being compared to Gone Girl. And so that sets yourself up for some lofty expectations. Those expectations were not met. Gone Girl was an adrenaline ride, the like of which I don't think I have ever been on since. And to be honest, to say to anybody, read this book and you will experience the same, you're setting yourself up for failure, I think it is incredibly ridiculous to say that The Girl on the Train is anything like as good as Gone Girl. It is not. It is an emperor in emperor's clothing. It was a girl on the train in emperor's clothing. The point is, there is no clothing. It is just a naked woman on a train who is not naked because she wasn't. That would have been a very different story. But the point remains, that was incredibly disappointing. Disappointing book, not disappointing because she wasn't naked. Anyway, I have to say that The Girl on the Train, while it was foolish to compare itself to Gone Girl, it was not nearly as bad as The Colour of Lies, which failed to actually gather any momentum at all. So Girl on the Train, I'm afraid you terminate here, you're out of the tournament.
Reading words and turning pages, this is taking ages. Can you speed it up a bit? Because this is pretty shit. As a Gone Girl, you've betrayed us, but all the promises you made us. 'Cause this book has got us questioning, what is the point? The point, the point. What is the point? The point, the point.
Our seventh pairing is Kill Your Friends versus the Oscar season. Kill Your Friends was another that I mentioned in my 2021 TBR. I picked it up in, maybe I didn't mention it actually. I picked it up in Oban when I was on holiday last year, and it just looked quite fun. It looked a fun book about, this guy that wants to kill his friends, basically. It is a record producer living in a record producer world, the rough tumble and boisterousness therein. The problem is that it is just very, very laddish, lad culture. They're very, very misogynistic, very brash, and it just was really difficult to read. I didn't connect with the main character. I thought it was just an exercise in rudeness and sexism. It is not a book that I would recommend anybody to read. I don't think it is good for your soul. I think it will hurt your heart. Do not read it. Keep yourself pure. I DNF'd it. I don't want that in my mind. Compare that to Oscar season. Oscar season I got from the pound shop, but was nevertheless excited about. The current covers are less misleading than the cover of which I bought, jet black with an Oscar on the front. It is ostensibly a murder mystery. Somebody is killed at a hotel during Oscar season, and so all of these rich and famous people are potentially celebrities for the murder. Actually, it's about the hotelier Juliet, and she's essentially stuck in a love triangle because either her ex and a prospective partner are both staying at the hotel or some similar arrangement. The ex is possibly dying. I can't quite remember the details. It was about a decade ago that I read it, but my disappointment has not left me. The point is, it wasn't really a murder mystery at all. There was a murder that happened and it was investigated in the background, but it was essentially some sort of romance novel with a love triangle in the setting of a murder, which is not how it was described. Had it been described as was, I wouldn't have bought it. Perhaps that's the problem. Perhaps if it was described properly, people who actually are into that kind of thing would have enjoyed it. I did not enjoy it because it is just really boring. Although I did end up with Juliet stuck in my head for ages. The worst of the two, I did not DNF Oscar season. I did read it to the end. I suppose I did invest somewhat grudgingly in the story a little bit because I wanted to know how it ended, so I am going to eliminate that from the worst book ever tournament. 3 pairings to go, and next up it is Armageddon versus Inferno. Armageddon was the final instalment in the Left Behind series by Jerry B. Jenkins and Tim LaHaye. I read one of these every year for 12 years as the first book I read each year up until 2020 when I read the last one. It is set, as you might expect, at Armageddon, the end of the world. The first book takes place with the return of Christ, taking Christians away in the rapture, and then it details the 7 horsemen of the apocalypse right up until the second coming in the last book. One would expect this to be a fairly dramatic and interesting time. Unfortunately, what it suffered from wasn't so much a lack of plot, but from too many books. It did not need to be a 12-part series. The first number of books in the series were very eventful. Stuff happened. The latter half, nothing happened. Whole books went by that were basically holding books. You went from filler paragraphs to filler chapters to then a couple of filler books until we got to the last book, which took place over the course of a day, waiting for the second coming. It was really unnecessary and very disappointing because I had been enjoying the series and I just felt it really lost its way. Also, all of the characters were really interchangeable. They all had the same personality in the main. They were all just generally good people stuck up at the end of the world, and so you could have changed the names and any characters could have been involved in any of the scenes and it wouldn't really have made a difference. So when you want to have such a plot-driven book where to the point that characters don't matter at all, you have to have a plot, and unfortunately it let us down on both counts. So that was really, like I say, a disappointing end. The second half of the series was really disappointing. Inferno is Dan Brown's book. I think is it his most recent book. I am in the untrendy camp of actually having enjoyed the Da Vinci Code. I thought it was a good book. I found the intrigue and the mystery and the sort of following all the clues really cool and fun and exciting, and I liked learning a lot about the sort of conspiracy theories around the Holy Grail and all that sort of stuff. And Jesus's potentially illegitimate daughter and all that kind of stuff. It was really good. The Tom Hanks movie is okay. I'm gonna put it out there. I thought the Tom Hanks movie was all right. And back then when I read it, the twist with Mr. Teabag, it was pretty good. Fast forward to Inferno, and at this point Dan Brown is just sort of bringing out the same formula over and over again, and I found that by Inferno there were fewer clues and a lot more padding between the clues. The twists were less twisty, and the whole thing just seemed to lack the sort of electric fizz of the Da Vinci Code, and I know that I'm going to get a hard time for saying I like the Da Vinci Code, but I did. Of the two, which did I like the least? Do you know, it was really difficult. They were both really disappointing. I guess the only way I can make a decision is that if there is going to be a Left Behind 13 and another Robert Langdon book, I'm probably more likely to get the Robert Langdon book, so he is going to be eliminated and Left Behind is going to remain as the worst of the two. Simple versus Chromosome 6. Dead Simple is a murder mystery featuring Roy Grace, which is now an ITV drama featuring John Sim. So I read 2 books in the Roy Grace series. I wasn't sure which of the 2 to put forward as the worst book ever. The first one which I read is the first in the series, which is this one, Dead Simple. The plot was okay. It was about a man on a stag night who is buried alive in a coffin, and it is made to look like it's been some sort of hijinks accident. He's gone missing, and so part of the story is told from the perspective of the groom in a coffin, and it was just, you know, quite claustrophobic, and that bit was quite good. Roy Grace as a character was quite compelling. His wife had gone missing years prior to the series commencing, and how he was dealing with her missingness was all very intriguing. The thing that really ground my gears beyond all reason is the conclusion, and this was the first book that on my then book review blog I actually gave away the ending to, because you just cannot possibly explain why you hate this book without a massive spoiler. It is this: we spend the entire book watching Roy Grace look for this missing person. Now, I'm going to tell you this. Roy Grace finds him. I shan't say whether he was alive or dead. Roy Grace finds him. Ask me how. How? Ask me. A clairvoyant! I kid ye not. This is how they resolved the story. Now let's be clear, folks. When you read a murder mystery, you want to see the detective piece it together, pull the impossible strands of clues together, have a light bulb moment, and explain what you missed the whole way through. You want that boom, that fizz, that ping when he goes, this is the answer, and then you see through your mind's eye the whole story unfold. You berate yourself for not noticing that there were 2 cups on that coffee table when there was only supposed to be 1 person in the house. You curse yourself for not asking how on earth that character knew that thing that nobody had told them if they were not in fact there at the time. You cannot possibly believe your own stupidity in not recognising the enormous slip-up that was made over there by the killer and was sitting in plain sight. You do. The sodding answer. It is disgusting and a total. It is disgusting. And then the second book, it just had this character in it. Just had this character in it, which. The character was known for making offensive remarks. Apparently that was what the character did. So he just kept on making racist, homophobic remarks, and it just seemed like an excuse, frankly, for the author to write down as many horrific things on the page as he could get away with. Plus, he seemed obsessed with, no matter what the story is, somehow finding a reason to involve multiple paedophiles. So, no, I did not find it very impressive as a series. I DNF'd the series entirely, but I am putting the first one forward in the tournament based on the sodding crystal bloody ball. And that is up against Chromosome 6. This was a book I bought in a bumper 2-book edition by Robin Cook. The first book was called Toxin, which was about a dad whose daughter was critically ill, having got food poisoning by a hamburger, and then he ends up going into this real espionage, like a proper industrial espionage, getting to the bottom of the food industry and all the kind of standards in that. And it was a really different kind of book. It wasn't a murder mystery in the traditional sense, but it was thrilling about the collusion throughout this whole industry. It wasn't the best book in the world, but you really got into it and you really rooted for him. I think the character's name was it was a guy who's the main character, and I think he might have been called Kim or something like that, but I really enjoyed it. The second book was Chromosome 6, unrelated, and it was about a kind of remote island where they'd been doing experiments and they'd created this sort of human-monkey hybrid race, and it was all the ethics around basically whether they were human or not, whether they deserved human rights and the sort of protection of this species. And that was really devastatingly shocking. It was the umpteenth in a series, and why you would include the umpteenth in a series in an omnibus with a standalone is beyond me, but they did. And having done that, what happened was we ended up in a situation where there was not enough backstory for a new reader like me to get into the series, but I expect far too much backstory for an established reader going over old ground. And so it just wasn't very good. They spent a lot of time bobbing around on a boat in Africa and nothing really was resolved at all. So I think they were both letdowns and disappointments, but I mean, I have to be honest with you, that Roy Grace thing and the crystal flippin' ball, unforgivable. So chromosome 6, I'm afraid you're at the end of the gene pool. And the final books in this contest are The Shack versus The Devil's Advocate. The Shack is by William Young, and it was released in 2007. It followed the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, and it was about a dad whose daughter had disappeared in remarkably similar circumstances. Is sent a letter by God to go and live in a shack for a while and hang out with God, who appears in human form and appears in all 4 of his 3 variations: the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, and a 4th version. Yes, it is a bit like Douglas Adams. All 4 members of the 3-person Trinity appear, and the concept of it is really interesting. It's about this person who's experienced huge trauma and a crisis of faith being able to talk with God. And you know, some people were a little uneasy about the idea of an author putting words into God's mouth and things like that. I don't really mind that. I think it's okay. I think it's fine. It's fiction. It's presented as fiction. It is one person's story, but the journey that the dad goes on is completely unbelievable, and the kind of way that the whole why do bad things happen to good people and all of the questions that are really big and legitimate and the plague people of faith all the time aren't really given a satisfactory resolution, and the characters' development and the characters' journey throughout the book is just so unlikely and unrealistic. I found it really disappointing because it was an enormous concept, a brilliant concept, really badly executed. The Devil's Advocate is the book on which the famous film is based, with Al Pacino, where a lawyer finds himself working at a firm which is run by the devil. The book is dreadfully boring and dull. The film is so much better, and that is something that I don't often say, but the film is so much better. Watch the film, ditch the book. Charlize Theron, wonderful. So of the 2, I'm going to say The Devil's Advocate is actually worse. In that it is just frightfully, shockingly boring. So The Shack collapses.
You're the worst around. Every time I read you make me frown. You're the worst around. I am gonna have to cut this down.
Okay, the group stages are done. We are into the quarter-finals now, and the books are going to go head-to-head once again. And this time it is The President is Missing versus Les Mis. Okay, So I'm going to say that on the basis of the fact that while Les Mis was, as I say, an insult to readers everywhere, they did manage to extract from the book a story which they managed to convert into a musical, which is good. So there is clearly somewhere in that unnecessarily long and pointless list of pages and pointless trivia, there's clearly somewhere in there a story that is worth telling and is enjoyable, and I did enjoy the musical. So at least something good came of it. Nothing good came of The President is Missing. Nothing good will ever come of The President is Missing. The only thing that can be better, that can be good now, is that there will be no third instalment. So on that basis, Les Mis, you are not worse. You are out of the competition. Fifty Shades versus A Clockwork Orange. I wish 50 Shades had been written in Nadsit, frankly. I would have much preferred not being able to understand anything that was written. However, I did, and on the basis that I could understand the story of 50 Shades of Grey, that has to at least be better than what is in effect a typewriter farting on a page and coming up with that indecipherable dross. So, A Clockwork Orange, my wife's going to kill me. I can't believe this is like her favourite book and her least favourite book head to head, and I didn't do this on purpose, and well, here we are. I'm going to have to say it. 50 Shades of Grey, you are going through. Clockwork Orange, you are what? Amy, go and make a cup of tea, please. Go and make a cup of tea. I would love a cup of tea, thank you. If you could just make a cup of tea, just out of the room, off you go, cup of tea, milk and two, thank you. And I'm just going to say this under my breath so she doesn't hear it, but closer, closer, closer. A Clockwork Orange, you are worse than 50 Shades of Grey. 50 Shades of Grey is out.
I hate you like I do. I hate you like I do. I hate Christian Grey. I hate Anna Steele too.
Seven Lies versus The Colour of Lies. I mean, neither of them were great, but Seven Lies I enjoyed reading more, because Colour of Lies, I felt like the whole book was build up. You spent the whole time waiting for the good bit and then realised the book was finished. Seven Lies, while it climaxed and then went on quite a while, there at least was a climax and a bit of a rhythm. So on that basis, I'm going to say that Colour of Lies was worse than Seven Lies, and therefore Seven Lies, you're out of the contest. Take it away, Mariana Grande.
Good plot, don't got it. Good pace, don't got it. My God, I've got it. Your face, I hate it. You like to write? Please don't. It's quite shocking. That's what it is, it's shocking.
Okay, up next, Kill Your Friends versus Armageddon. I would recommend the Left Behind series on the whole as a unit. I suppose to some people, perhaps. My wife recently picked up Kill Your Friends in a charity shop. I said, we have it, but it's awful, don't read it. She plans to ignore me. So on the basis that I recommended that it should not be read, I have to say that is worse. Armageddon, you're out of the contest.
I believe I would die if I had to
And that leaves us with Dead Simple versus The Devil's Advocate. I cannot possibly get over the Crystal Flaming Ball. The Devil's Advocate, you did produce a good film for us. You are not worse. You are out of the contest. Welcome to the semi-finals of the worst book ever in the Euro 20s Plenty tournament. And you know what's going to happen. We're going to go head to head with the remaining books. There are 5 left in contention. First of all, we have The President is Missing versus A Clockwork Orange. We're getting to some really horrid books now. Really horrible, nasty, appalling books. The President is Missing. I feel expectations were raised by the authors. Perhaps if Bill Clinton had not been listed as an author, I would not have been quite so harsh on it. James Patterson, to be fair, I tend to have fairly low expectations of. However, A Clockwork Orange, that has a fair amount of hype around it as well. And I just can't understand why anybody has given it hype, because it is indecipherable nonsense. I mean, how can we possibly say that is more fun to read? I'm sorry, it has to go through. President is Missing. You are missing from the final round.
So bye-bye, Mr. President. You put your pen in the pot while the flowers are dry.
And now we have Colour of Lies versus Kill Your Friends versus Dead Simple. So, Kill Your Friends and Dead Simple both have the kind of nasty, horrid awfulness that distracted me from the story, whereas Colour of Lies was just guilty of not really picking up speed and pace. I feel that could be improved with better editing, better story writing, better characters, and better plot. But I think simply everything just could have, if everything that it had was just better, it would have been better, whereas the others had things that actively turned me off. So I'm going to say Colour of Lies does not deserve to be in their company. You're out of the contest.
I'm depressed at the hours that are wasted here. Promise of great new book, feeling like a being rocked.
And then with Kill Your Friends versus Dead Simple being left head to head, both were hugely offensive, both were just nasty books, but Kill Your Friends I didn't read enough of to make judgment on the plot, which may be proof in and of itself that I just couldn't progress. However, Dead Simple, even wading through the minging, pedo, horrid stuff, we're still left with the crystal ball, which I feel is just utterly unfair. It's not like The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, where Agatha Christie broke a rule and then created a classic. It is, he broke a rule that is a fundamental principle of the reader-author relationship. He damaged the art of literature. So you're going through, I'm afraid, Dead Simple to the final. Kill your friends, kill yourself. So we have whittled 20 books down to 2 for the worst book ever. It is The Clockwork Orange versus Dead Simple. Clockwork Orange, Dead Simple. 2 books stand before me. One of you is the worst thing that was ever committed to paper. And I have made my decision. Dead Simple. You, despite your many flaws which we have discussed, did provide at least an interesting concept for a detective, the fate of whose wife I would have liked to have found out. And you did have the whole claustrophobic bit in a coffin, which was well done in your defence. That does not excuse the crystal ball, but at least you have your good points. A Clockwork Orange. You stand apart as having a story I cannot understand because I do not speak made-up languages. It is a disgrace that you have earned the status and respect you have over multiple decades, that you were adapted into a film which has been lauded without bothering to be written in real words. You are not understandable. You should not exist. Dead Simple. You're out of the competition. Shantae, sachet, go away. Clockwork Orange. You are the worst book ever.
Go now, go. Get on the shelf. It would be less painful to put my eyes to the scale. What's the point of writing words no one can understand? You're not a genius. Incoherence and profound. Oh, trust me, I will survive without your clockwork orange in my life. It's gonna dry. I'm not gonna look you up to decipher your strange plot while you don't sigh. I will survive. Hey, hey.
I suspect many of you will disagree, not least Amy. Please comment below your thoughts on my selection and your selection. What would you say is the worst book you have ever read? Good luck to our friends south of the border. I am rooting for you tonight and I really hope it does come home. Come on, England. Thank you for watching. I look forward to seeing you on Thursday the 15th of July for our very special edition with the final part of Double O No, with the Hamlet versus Macbeth results, with a massive channel announcement and some very special surprises. Until then, bon voyage.
It's coming.